You walk into networking events and important meetings, but somehow the conversations never seem to go your way. People's attention drifts, they don't remember you, and opportunities slip through your fingers. Every day you watch others effortlessly command attention and build instant rapport while you struggle to make meaningful connections, wondering why some people seem to have a magnetic quality that draws others in while you feel invisible in the room. I am Dale Carnegie, and I spent my lifetime studying the art of human connection, teaching millions of people how to transform their relationships through the power of conversation. What I discovered about winning people over will revolutionize how you connect with anyone. From your boss to your spouse to complete strangers, the conversation principles I'll share have opened doors, built careers, and created lasting friendships for countless people across the globe. But first, like this video, subscribe for more life-changing communication wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready to master the art of conversation. I wasn't born with the gift of conversation. In fact, I was probably one of the most socially awkward young men you could imagine. Growing up on our small farm in Maryville, Missouri, I spent more time talking to our livestock than to people. My father, a hard-working farmer who struggled to make ends meet, had little time for what he called fancy talk. My mother, bless her heart, encouraged my education, but even she couldn't have predicted where my journey would lead. The truth is, I was terrified of people. When neighbors came to visit, I would hide behind my mother's apron or find urgent chores in the barn. At school, I sat in the back, hoping the teacher wouldn't call on me. The few times I was forced to speak, my voice would crack, my hands would shake, and I'd stumble over the simplest words. Other children seemed to navigate social situations effortlessly, while I felt like I was drowning in every interaction. The turning point came when I enrolled at the State Teachers College in Warrensburg. I was 17, still painfully shy, and absolutely determined to overcome what I saw as my greatest weakness. I'll never forget the day I walked into Professor Overstreet's public speaking class. My palms were sweating, my heart was racing, and every fiber of my being wanted to turn around and run. But something remarkable happened in that classroom. Professor Overstreet didn't just teach us to speak, he taught us to connect. He showed us that the secret to powerful communication wasn't perfect diction or fancy vocabulary. It was something much simpler and infinitely more powerful: genuine human connection. I threw myself into debate in public, speaking with the desperation of a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. I practiced in front of mirrors, rehearsed with fellow students, and gradually began to understand something profound. People didn't want to be impressed by my brilliance. They wanted to feel understood, appreciated, and valued. My breakthrough moment came during a debate about agricultural policy. Instead of launching into prepared statistics and arguments, I started by talking about my father's struggles on our farm. I spoke from the heart about watching him work from dawn to dusk, about the worry lines that deepened around my mother's eyes during bad harvests. Suddenly, the audience wasn't just listening, they were connecting. They saw their own struggles reflected in my story. That night, I won my first debate trophy, but more importantly, I discovered that conversation wasn't about being clever or impressive. It was about being human. It was about finding the common ground that connects us, all our hopes, our fears, our dreams, and our struggles. From that moment forward, I became a student of human nature, fascinated by what makes people tick, what makes them feel valued, and what draws them to certain individuals while repelling them from others. After years of studying human behavior, both in classrooms and in the real world, I discovered something that shocked me. Most people approach conversations backwards. They walk into interactions thinking about what they want to say, what impression they want to make, or what they hope to get from the other person. This self-focused approach is exactly why so many conversations feel forced, awkward, or ultimately forgettable. I learned this lesson the hard way during my early days as a traveling salesman for the international correspondence schools. I would stride into businesses, armed with my carefully rehearsed pitch, ready to dazzle potential customers with features and benefits. I failed miserably. Day after day, I watched doors close in my face, saw eyes glaze over during my presentations, and felt the sting of rejection. One particularly humbling afternoon in Nebraska, after being turned away from yet another office, I sat on a park bench and really examined what was happening. I was so focused on what I wanted to sell that I completely ignored what the other person wanted to feel heard, understood, and valued. I was treating every interaction like a transaction instead of a human connection. That's when I had my first major breakthrough about human nature. Everyone you meet is carrying an invisible sign around their neck that says, "Make me feel important." This isn't vanity or selfishness, it's fundamental human psychology. We all have a deep, often unconscious need to feel significant, appreciated, and worthy of attention. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time someone made you feel truly important? Not flattered or complimented superficially, but genuinely valued and appreciated. How did it make you feel? Didn't you find yourself drawn to that person, wanting to spend more time with them, eager to help them or be around them? This realization changed everything for me. I stopped approaching conversations with the question, "What can I get from this person?" and started asking, "How can I make this person feel valued and important?" The transformation in my interactions was immediate and dramatic, but here's the crucial distinction I discovered. There's a world of difference between genuine appreciation and empty flattery. People can sense insincerity from a mile away. Their internal radar is constantly scanning for authenticity versus manipulation. When you try to make someone feel important through false praise or calculated compliments, they feel it immediately, and it creates the opposite effect. They feel manipulated and pulled away from you. Genuine appreciation requires you to look for something real to value in every person you meet. And here's the beautiful truth. There's always something worthy of appreciation in every human being if you take the time to look for it. It might be their dedication to their work, their love for their family, their perseverance through difficulties, or simply their willingness to share their time with you. I began to see every conversation as an opportunity to give a gift of feeling valued and important. Instead of viewing interactions as competitions where someone wins and someone loses, I started seeing them as collaborations where both people could walk away feeling better about themselves and more connected to another human being. This shift in perspective didn't just change my professional success, though it certainly did that. It transformed every aspect of my life. My relationships deepened, my marriage grew stronger, and I found myself surrounded by people who genuinely enjoyed my company, not because I was particularly charming or witty, but because I had learned to make them feel genuinely important and appreciated. The first and most powerful conversation trick I ever learned came from an unexpected source, Theodore Roosevelt himself. I had the privilege of meeting President Roosevelt at the White House, and what I observed during that encounter changed my entire approach to human connection forever. I arrived at the White House nervous and overwhelmed, clutching my prepared talking points and rehearsed questions. But within moments of meeting Roosevelt, I realized something extraordinary was happening. The president wasn't trying to impress me with his knowledge or authority. Instead, he was genuinely fascinated by me, my background, my work, my thoughts and opinions. Roosevelt had somehow discovered that I was interested in naval history, and he spent our entire conversation asking me thoughtful questions about maritime strategy and historical naval battles. Here was the most powerful man in America, genuinely curious about my interests and perspectives. He listened intently to my responses, asked follow-up questions, and shared related stories that built upon what I had said. When our meeting ended, I felt like I was walking on air. It wasn't because Roosevelt had flattered me or told me how wonderful I was. It was because he had shown genuine interest in who I was as a person. He had made me feel important, not through empty praise, but through the gift of his authentic attention and curiosity. That's when I understood the first great secret of conversation. If you want to be interesting, become interested. People are naturally drawn to those who show genuine curiosity about them, their thoughts, their experiences, and their perspectives. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to fake interest. They ask surface-level questions while mentally preparing their next comment. Or they use interest as a manipulation tactic to get something they want. This counterfeit interest is worse than no interest at all because it feels hollow and calculated. To the other person, genuine interest requires a fundamental shift in your mindset. You must truly believe that every person you meet has something valuable to teach you, some unique perspective that can enrich your understanding of the world. You must approach each conversation with the curiosity of an explorer discovering new territory. I developed what I call the Roosevelt technique. Before meeting anyone, I would research their background, their interests, their challenges, and their achievements, but not so I could impress them with my knowledge, so I could ask better questions and show more meaningful interest in their experiences. When you meet someone new, instead of thinking about what you want to say about yourself, focus entirely on discovering what makes them unique. What challenges are they facing? What achievements are they proud of? What experiences have shaped their perspective? What are they passionate about? The questions you ask reveal the depth of your interest. Surface questions like how's work or nice weather, isn't it? Signal that you're just making polite conversation. But thoughtful questions like what's the most rewarding part of your work or what project are you most excited about right now show that you're genuinely interested in understanding them as a person. I learned to listen not just to what people said, but to what they didn't say. I watched their eyes light up when they talked about certain topics, noticed when their energy shifted, and paid attention to the subjects they kept returning to. These were clues to what truly mattered to them. The magic happens when you remember these details and reference them in future conversations. When you ask about their daughter's piano recital that they mentioned 3 weeks ago, or inquire about the progress on the project they were excited about, you demonstrate that your interest was genuine and lasting. This technique transformed every aspect of my professional and personal life. Business relationships deepened into friendships. Strangers became allies. Even difficult people became more cooperative when they felt genuinely heard and understood. Remember Roosevelt's lesson. People will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And nothing makes people feel more valued than your genuine, sustained interest in who they are and what matters to them. Years after my encounter with Roosevelt, I began to understand why genuine interest has such a powerful effect on human beings. Through my conversations with psychologists and my observations of thousands of interactions, I discovered that there are deep psychological principles at work when we show authentic curiosity about others. The human brain is wired to respond positively to attention and interest. When someone focuses on us with genuine curiosity, it activates what I learned to call the recognition reward system in our minds. We literally feel good when we're truly seen and heard by another person. It's not just emotional, it's biochemical. I keep a collection of thank you letters from people who attended my courses, and they consistently express the same sentiment. You made me feel like the most important person in the room. But here's what's remarkably rarely gave these people advice or solved their problems. What I did was show them genuine interest, ask thoughtful questions, and listen with my whole being to their responses. This taught me something profound about human psychology. We all live in our own private worlds, dealing with our own thoughts, worries, dreams, and challenges. Most of the time, we feel isolated in these inner worlds. When someone shows genuine interest in our thoughts and experiences, they're building a bridge into our private world. They're saying, your thoughts matter, your experiences are valuable, you are worth understanding. Think about the people in your life who you're most drawn to. I'll bet they're not necessarily the most intelligent or accomplished people you know. They're the people who have shown genuine interest in you, who ask about your projects, remember your concerns, and seem genuinely curious about your perspectives and experiences. The opposite is also true. We naturally pull away from people who show no interest in us, who dominate conversations with their own stories, or who seem to be waiting for their turn to talk rather than truly listening. These people make us feel invisible and unimportant, even if they're brilliant or accomplished. I discovered that genuine interest creates what I call emotional safety. When people feel that you're truly interested in understanding them rather than judging them or trying to impress them, they relax, their defenses come down, they become more open, more honest, and more willing to connect. This principle works because it addresses one of our deepest human fears, the fear of being misunderstood or dismissed. When you show genuine interest in someone, you're communicating that they're worth understanding, that their thoughts and experiences have value, and that you see them as a complete person rather than just a means to an end. But genuine interest must be sustainable. It can't be something you turn on and off, based on what you need from someone. True interest in others becomes a way of life, a fundamental approach to human interaction. It requires cultivating genuine curiosity about human nature, about the experiences that shape people, and about the unique perspective each person brings to the world. I learn to approach every interaction with what I call beginner's mind, the assumption that every person has something to teach me, some insight or experience that can broaden my understanding of life. This mindset made every conversation an adventure in discovery rather than a performance or a transaction. The compound effect of consistent, genuine interest is extraordinary. Over time, you build a reputation as someone who truly cares about others. People seek you out not because you have all the answers, but because they know you'll listen with genuine curiosity to their questions. You become a person others trust with their thoughts, their concerns, and their dreams. This is the foundation upon which all meaningful conversation is built. The genuine belief that every person you meet has something valuable to offer, and the commitment to discovering what that something is. In my first office in New York City, I kept a small mirror on my desk, not out of vanity, but as a tool for transformation. Every morning before my first appointment, I would look into that mirror and practice something that would change the trajectory of my entire career. The art of genuine smiling. I know what you're thinking. Smiling seems like the most basic, obvious thing in the world, but I discovered that most people have never learned the difference between a mechanical smile and one that comes from their whole being. And that difference determines whether you attract people or unknowingly push them away. My awakening to the power of authentic smiling came during my early days as an instructor. I noticed that some of my colleagues could walk into a room and instantly lift the energy, while others, equally qualified and knowledgeable, seemed to drain the life out of any gathering. The difference wasn't in their expertise or their words. It was in the energy they brought with them. And the smile was the outward expression of that inner state. I began studying what I call smile mechanics versus smile authenticity. A mechanical smile engages only the mouth muscles. It's the smile you put on for photographs or when social politeness demands it, but people can sense immediately that it's not real. Their subconscious mind picks up on the disconnect between the forced, expression, and the genuine emotional state. An authentic smile, however, begins on the inside. It starts with a genuine feeling of warmth, appreciation, or joy that naturally expresses itself through your entire face. Your eyes crinkle slightly, your whole countenance lights up, and there's an unmistakable energy that radiates from you. Here's what I discovered. You cannot fake this kind of smile, but you can cultivate the internal state that creates it naturally. The secret lies in what you choose to focus on when you meet someone new. I trained myself to look for something genuinely positive in every person I encountered. Maybe it was their dedication to their work, their love for their family, their perseverance through challenges, or simply their willingness to share their time with me. When I found that genuine point of appreciation, the authentic smile happened. Automatically, the transformation in my interactions was remarkable. People began responding to me differently. They seemed more relaxed, more open, more willing to engage. Business meetings became more collaborative. Strangers became friendlier. Even my family relationships improved because I was bringing this genuine warmth into every interaction. But I learned that authentic smiling goes beyond just facial expressions. It's about smiling with your whole being, your voice, your posture, your energy, and your entire presence. When you're truly glad to see someone, it shows in how you say their name, how you extend your hand, how you lean in to listen to them. I discovered the power of what I call vocal smiling, the warmth that comes through in your voice. When you're genuinely pleased to be talking with someone, people can hear a smile over the telephone. They can sense it in how you speak their name. They feel it in the tone you use when asking about their day or their work. The physical practice was important. 2. I learned to relax my face, to let go of the tension that creates forced expressions, and to allow my genuine feelings to show through naturally. I practiced in that mirror until authentic warmth became my default state, rather than something I had to consciously create. The most profound lesson I learned about smiling is this: it's not something you do to people, it's something you share with them. It's the outward expression of an inner decision to find joy and value in human connection. When your smile comes from genuine appreciation for the person in front of you, it becomes irresistible because it makes them feel valued and welcomed. This principle transformed not just my professional success, but my entire approach to life. I began each day by choosing to be genuinely glad for the opportunity to connect with others. And that internal decision manifested as the kind of smile that opens hearts and minds. During my years of teaching and observing human interaction, I had the privilege of corresponding with Dr. William James, the renowned psychologist from Harvard. In one of his letters to me, he confirmed something I had observed but hadn't fully understood. People feel what you feel before you ever speak a word. Dr. James explained to me the fascinating concept of emotional contagion, the way our internal states broadcast to others through subtle signals they pick up unconsciously. Your heart rate, your breathing pattern, the tension in your muscles, the energy you carry, all of these communicate to others at a level below conscious awareness. This revelation helped me understand why some people have a magnetic presence, while others, despite their best efforts, seem to repel connection. It's not about what they're trying to project, about what they're actually feeling and experiencing internally. I began to experiment with this principle in my own interactions. Before entering any conversation, I would take a moment to check my internal state. Was I anxious about the outcome? Focused on what I wanted to get from the person? Worried about making a good impression? All of these internal states created tension that others could sense immediately. Instead, I learned to cultivate what I call conversational presence, a state of genuine calm, curiosity, and warmth that becomes the foundation for all meaningful connection. This isn't about pretending to feel something you don't. It's about choosing to focus on thoughts and feelings that naturally create the internal state you want to share. The mirror neurons Dr. James told me about are fascinating. These specialized brain cells cause us to unconsciously mimic the emotional states of people around us. When you're genuinely calm and centered, others begin to feel more at ease. When you're authentically enthusiastic about connecting with them, they start to feel that enthusiasm too. I discovered that mastering your internal state is like tuning an instrument before a performance. You can have all the right words and techniques, but if your internal state is discordant, the entire interaction will feel off to the other person. The breathing technique I developed became essential to my preparation. Before any important conversation, I would take 3 deep, slow breaths and consciously release any tension in my shoulders and jaw. Then I would remind myself of my genuine intention for the interaction, usually something like, I want to understand this person and find ways to be helpful to them. Your posture broadcasts your internal state too. When you're truly interested in someone, you naturally lean slightly toward them. When you're defensive or closed off, your body pulls back and creates physical barriers. When you're genuinely confident and at ease, your posture becomes open and welcoming without any conscious effort. I learned that people's subconscious minds are constantly scanning for authenticity versus performance. They can sense when you're putting on an emotion versus genuinely experiencing it. This is why technique alone never works. Must be rooted in a genuine internal shift. The energy you bring to a conversation sets the tone for everything that follows. If you approach interactions with scarcity thinking, worried about what you might not get or how you might be judged, you create an energy of neediness or defensiveness that pushes people away. But when you approach conversations with abundance, thinking genuinely curious about the other person and confident in your ability to create value through connection, you radiate an energy that draws people in and makes them feel safe and appreciated. This understanding revolutionized my approach to difficult conversations too. Instead of dreading challenging interactions, I learned to prepare my internal state first. I would remind myself that even in disagreement, my goal was to understand the other person's perspective and find common ground. This internal shift changed the entire dynamic of these conversations. The compound effect of mastering your internal state is extraordinary. Over time, you develop a reputation as someone who makes others feel comfortable and valued. People seek you out not because you're particularly clever or entertaining, but because they feel better about themselves when they're around you. I still have the notebook I used for over 30 years to master what I consider the most immediately powerful conversation skill: remembering names. That small, leather-bound book contains my personal system for never forgetting a name, and it's been responsible for more business opportunities, deeper relationships, and stronger connections than any other single technique I've developed. The inspiration for this system came, once again, from my observation of Theodore Roosevelt. During my time around the White House, I watched in amazement as Roosevelt greeted hundreds of people by name, not just dignitaries and officials, but White House staff, visiting farmers, children, and complete strangers he'd met just once months earlier. More remarkably, he often remembered personal details about their families, their work, or their concerns. When I asked him about this ability, Roosevelt shared something profound. A person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. He explained that remembering someone's name, knowing it naturally in conversation, immediately communicates respect, attention, and value in a way that no amount of charm or wit can match. I realized that most people approach names backwards. They think of name remembering as a nice social skill, like good table manners or proper pronunciation. But Roosevelt understood something deeper. A person's name represents their entire identity, their family heritage, their personal story. When you remember and use someone's name, You're acknowledging their individual worth as a human being. The psychological impact is immediate and powerful. When someone uses your name in conversation, especially someone you've just met, your brain literally perks up. Studies have shown that hearing our own name activates the same neural regions associated with self-recognition and personal identity. It makes us feel seen, acknowledged, and important. But here's where most people fail. They treat name remembering as a memory trick, rather than an act of genuine interest. They use mnemonic devices or word associations without connecting the name to the actual person. This mechanical approach often backfires because it feels impersonal and calculated. My system was different. I developed what I call the Roosevelt method for name mastery, and it has never failed me in over 3 decades of use. First, when someone introduces themselves, I repeat their name immediately. "It's wonderful to meet you, Margaret." This initial repetition helps cement the name in my mind, but more importantly, it shows that I'm paying attention to them as an individual. Second, I ask a thoughtful question about their name, if appropriate. "That's a lovely name. Is it a family name? Or I don't think I've met another Marcus. Does it have special meaning in your family?" This creates a brief story around the name that makes it much more memorable. Third, I use their name naturally throughout our conversation, not excessively, which feels artificial, but at key moments when I'm asking questions or making important points. "Margaret, what's been the most rewarding part of your work in education?" Or "That's fascinating, Marcus, I'd never thought about the issue from that perspective." Fourth, and this is crucial, I write their name down in my notebook along with key details about them, their interests, their challenges, and our conversation. This isn't just for memory, it's a commitment to treating them as a whole person worth remembering. Fifth, I make a point of using their name when I see them again, often combined with a reference to something from our previous conversation. "Marcus, how did that project presentation go?" Or "Margaret, did your daughter end up enjoying the piano lessons?" The results of this system have been extraordinary. People light up when you remember not just their name, but details about their life and interests. They feel valued and important, which naturally draws them toward you and makes them more open to deeper connection. I've watched business deals come together simply because I remembered a client's name and asked about their son's baseball season. I've seen tense situations diffuse when I addressed someone respectfully by name while acknowledging their concerns. I've built lifelong friendships that began with the simple act of making someone feel important through remembering their name. The compound interest of name mastery is remarkable. Over time, you build a network of people who feel personally connected to you because you've taken the time to know them as individuals. They become allies, advocates, and friends, not because you impressed them with your brilliance, but because you honored them with your attention and memory. Remember, in a world where people increasingly feel anonymous and unnoticed, the simple act of remembering someone's name is a gift of immense value. It costs you nothing, but it makes the other person feel like they matter. While studying the name mastery techniques of successful leaders, I came across Andrew Carnegie's remarkable business card collection. Thousands of cards, meticulously organized with handwritten notes about each person's interests, family details, business concerns, and personal aspirations. This industrial titan understood something profound. Memory is not just a cognitive skill, it's a tool of love and respect. This discovery led me to develop what I call the memory palace of human connection, a systematic approach to remembering not just names, but the rich details that make each person unique and valuable. This goes far beyond simple name recognition into the realm of genuine human understanding. I learned to think of my mind as having individual rooms for each person I met, with each room containing the details that made them who they were. In Margaret's room, I might store her passion for education reform, her concern about her daughter's piano lessons, and her recent promotion to principal. In Marcus's room, I'd keep his innovative project ideas, his weekend woodworking hobby, and his pride in his son's academic achievements. The ancient Greeks had a technique called the method of loci, where they would mentally place information in familiar locations to aid memory. I adapted this principle for human relationships, creating mental files that went far beyond basic demographic information to include the dreams, concerns, achievements, and personality traits that made each person distinct. But this system required a fundamental shift in how I approached every interaction. Instead of focusing on what I wanted to communicate or achieve, I became a collector of human stories. I listened not just for factual information, but for the emotional undertones that revealed what truly mattered to each person. When someone mentioned their weekend activities, I didn't just file away plays, golf. I noted their enthusiasm level, whether they played for relaxation or competition, who they played with, and how it fit into their broader life priorities. These details became the threads that connected me to their actual experience rather than just surface-level small talk. Discovered that people reveal their deepest values and concerns through what they choose to share and how they share it. The excitement in someone's voice when they talk about their children's accomplishments, the frustration when they mention workplace challenges, the pride when they describe a personal achievement. These emotional markers became part of my mental file for each person. The practice of writing these details in my notebook wasn't just for memory retention, it was a form of honoring each person I met. When I took the time to record that Sarah was concerned about her mother's health, that Tom was excited about his daughter's college acceptance, or that Linda was frustrated with the new company policies, I was treating their lives as worthy of attention and care. This systematic approach to remembering people transformed my ability to build long-term relationships. When I encountered someone weeks or months after our initial meeting, I could pick up our conversation exactly where we'd left off. I could ask about the specific concerns they'd shared, celebrate the achievements they'd been working toward, and reference the interests they'd expressed. The psychological impact on others was profound. In a world where most people feel like they're having the same shallow conversations over and over again, suddenly encountering someone who remembered their personal concerns and interests made them feel truly seen and valued. But the most remarkable discovery was how this practice changed me as a person. By systematically paying attention to what mattered to others, I became genuinely more interested in human nature, more empathetic to different life experiences, and more skilled at finding common ground with people from vastly different backgrounds. My memory palace became a repository of human wisdom. Each person I met taught me something about resilience, creativity, love, ambition, or perseverance. Their stories became part of my understanding of what it means to be human, and this broader perspective made me a better friend, colleague, and family member. The compound effect was extraordinary. Over time, I built a reputation as someone who truly cared about others, not because I was particularly saintly or selfless, but because I had developed the habit of paying attention to what made each person unique and valuable. This system works because it addresses one of our deepest human needs, the need to be known and remembered as individuals rather than just faces in the crowd. When you demonstrate that someone's life details are worth remembering, you're communicating their inherent value as a human being. The most transformative conversation skill I ever developed came from studying the interview techniques I used with hundreds of successful people for my research. I discovered that the ratio of listening to speaking in any conversation determines whether you're seen as brilliant or boring, magnetic or forgettable, trustworthy or suspicious. My breakthrough came during an interview with a prominent businessman who was known for being difficult and guarded. I had prepared an extensive list of questions, But within the first 5 minutes, I realized my approach was all wrong. He was giving short, defensive answers and seemed eager to end our meeting. Then, I shifted strategies completely. Instead of pushing forward with my agenda, I asked him one simple question: what's been the most surprising challenge in building your business? Then, I did something most people find incredibly difficult: stopped talking and truly listened. To his answer, his entire demeanor changed. His shoulders relaxed, his voice became more animated, and he began sharing not just facts about his business, but his genuine thoughts and feelings about the journey. What I had planned as a 30-minute interview stretched to nearly 3 hours, and by the end, he was thanking me for being such an engaging conversationalist even though I had spoken less than 20% of the time. That day, I learned the paradox of conversation. To be seen as interesting, you must become interested. To be memorable, you must make others feel memorable. To be valued, you must demonstrate that you value others' thoughts and experiences. But there's a crucial distinction between hearing and listening that most people never master. Hearing is passive, you're simply registering the words being spoken. Listening is active, you're engaging with the meaning, emotion, and significance behind the words. I developed what I call levels of listening that transform ordinary conversations into meaningful connections. Level 1 is surface listening. You're waiting for your turn to talk while mentally preparing your response. The other person senses your distraction and feels unheard, even if you nod and make appropriate sounds. Level 2 is factual listening. You're paying attention to the information being shared, but missing the emotional undertones and deeper significance. You might remember what someone said, but you miss how they felt about it. Level 3 is empathetic listening. You're listening not just to the words, but to the feelings, concerns, hopes, and values underneath the words. You're hearing the whole person, not just their surface message. Level 4 is transformative listening. You're so fully present and engaged that the other person feels truly understood and validated. They often discover new insights about themselves, simply because you've created space for them to think out loud. The questions you ask reveal which level you're operating from. Surface questions like how's work invite surface answers, but deeper questions like what's the most rewarding part of your current project, or what's been on your mind lately, invite people to share their real thoughts and feelings. I learned to listen for what people didn't say as much as what they did say. The topics they avoided, the emotions they seemed to suppress, the dreams they mentioned hesitantly. These revealed as much about them as their direct statements. The physical practice of listening became as important as the mental practice. I learned to maintain natural eye contact without staring, to lean slightly forward to show engagement, and to use small verbal confirmations like I see, or that must have been challenging to encourage them to continue sharing. But the most powerful listening technique I discovered was reflective listening, occasionally summarizing what I heard to confirm my understanding. So what I'm hearing is that you're excited about the potential of this project, but concerned about whether you have adequate resources to execute it well. Is that accurate? This technique serves multiple purposes. It shows you're truly paying attention. It gives the other person a chance to clarify or correct your understanding. And it often helps them gain new insights into their own situation by hearing their thoughts reflected back clearly. The transformation in my relationships was remarkable. People began seeking me out for important conversations. They trusted me with their concerns, their dreams, and their deepest thoughts. Business relationships evolved into friendships. Family conversations became richer and more meaningful. Realized that in our noisy, distracted world, the gift of focused attention has become incredibly rare and valuable. When you give someone your complete, judgment-free attention, you're offering them something they rarely receive from anyone else. the experience of being truly heard and understood. The compound effect of masterful listening is extraordinary. Over time, you become known as someone people can talk to, someone who creates safe space for others to explore their thoughts and feelings. You build a reputation not as the smartest person in the room, but as the one who makes everyone else feel smarter, more valued, and more understood. One of the most humbling thank you notes I ever received came from Helen Keller after I had the privilege of spending an afternoon with her. She wrote that despite her inability to hear my words, she felt more understood during our conversation than in most of her interactions with people who possessed perfect hearing. This taught me something profound. True listening transcends the physical mechanics of hearing and enters the realm of complete human understanding. Helen's insight helped me realize that deep listening is an internal practice as much as an external skill. It requires what I call conversational discipline, the ability to quiet your own mental chatter and create internal space for another person's thoughts and feelings. The biggest obstacle to deep listening is what I discovered most people do unconsciously. They listen through the filter of their own experiences, judgments, and agendas. When someone shares a problem, the listener immediately starts thinking about similar problems they've faced, advice they want to give, or how the situation relates to their own life. I learned to recognize this tendency in myself and developed what I call listening meditation, the practice of consciously setting aside my own thoughts, opinions, and reactions to create a clear channel for understanding the other person's perspective. Before any important conversation, I would take a moment to mentally clear what I call my listening space. I would acknowledge any preconceptions I had about the person or the topic, any agenda I might have for the conversation, and any personal concerns that might distract me. Then I would consciously set these aside to create room for whatever the other person needed to share. The internal practices that create listening mastery became as important as the external techniques. I learned to notice when my mind wandered to my own experiences or when I started formulating responses instead of staying present with what was being said. When I caught myself doing this, I would gently redirect my attention back to the speaker. One of the most powerful discoveries was learning to resist the urge to fix, solve, or improve what someone was sharing. Most people don't want immediate solutions, they want to be heard and understood first. When you jump too quickly into problem-solving mode, you often miss the real issue and make the other person feel like their feelings aren't valid. I developed what I call emotional listening, paying attention not just to the facts being shared, but to the feelings underneath those facts. When someone told me about a workplace challenge, I listened for whether they felt frustrated, overwhelmed, excited, or scared. When they shared an achievement, I noticed whether they felt proud, relieved, surprised, or validated. This emotional listening allowed me to respond to the whole person, not just the surface story. Instead of immediately offering advice about the workplace challenge, I might first acknowledge the frustration. That sounds incredibly frustrating. You're working hard but not seeing the recognition you deserve. This validation often opened the door to deeper, more meaningful conversation. The gift of silence became one of my most powerful tools. I learned that most people are uncomfortable with conversational pauses and rush to fill them with words. But these moments of silence often create space for the most important thoughts and feelings to emerge. When someone paused while speaking, instead of jumping in with a comment or question, I learned to wait patiently for them to continue. The physical environment of listening matters too. I discovered that creating the right setting, turning away from distractions, maintaining appropriate eye contact, keeping an open posture communicated respect and attention even before words were exchanged. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of deep listening was learning to listen without judgment. This doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says. but it means creating a safe space where they can share their authentic thoughts and feelings without fear of criticism or dismissal. This level of listening creates what I call conversational intimacy, a sense of connection and trust that allows both people to be more honest, vulnerable, and real with each other. It transforms casual acquaintances into meaningful relationships and deepens existing connections in remarkable ways. The fifth and final conversation trick I want to share with you came from watching my own failures as much as my successes. For years, I made the mistake of trying to connect with people by talking about what interested me, what I thought was important, or what I wanted them to understand. The results were predictably disappointing glazed eyes, polite but unenthusiastic responses, and conversations that felt forced and artificial. Everything changed when I began building what I called my conversation starter collection, the library of topics that seemed to ignite passion and engagement in almost anyone. But more importantly, I learnt the deeper principle behind this technique. People only truly engage when they feel the conversation is relevant to their world, their concerns, and their interests. The breakthrough came during a dinner party where I was seated next to a gentleman who seemed bored and disengaged with the general conversation. I had noticed him perk up earlier when someone mentioned stamp collecting, so I asked him about his collection. His entire demeanor transformed. For the next hour, he shared fascinating stories about rare stamps, the history behind them, and the detective work involved in authentication. What struck me wasn't just his enthusiasm. It was how the conversation energized both of us. By talking about his passion, I learned about history, geography, economics, and human nature. By showing genuine interest in his expertise, I had created a bridge that allowed both of us to enjoy meaningful connection. This experience taught me that talking in terms of someone else's interests isn't just a conversation technique, a form of generosity. You're giving them the gift of being seen as an expert, of having their knowledge valued, and of sharing something they care deeply about with someone who appreciates it. I began developing what I call the interest inventory approach to conversation. Instead of coming to interactions with my own agenda, I would listen carefully for clues about what genuinely mattered to the other person. These clues came through various signals: what topics made their eyes light up, what subjects they returned to repeatedly, what achievements they mentioned with obvious pride, what concerns they expressed with genuine emotion. The key was learning to distinguish between polite interests and passionate interests. Many people will discuss the weather or current events out of social obligation, but their true engagement only emerges when the conversation touches on something they genuinely care about: their family, their work projects, their hobbies, their values, or their dreams. I discovered that most people have what I call expertise islands, areas where they have deep knowledge, strong opinions, or meaningful experience. When you can identify and navigate to these islands, the conversation becomes mutually enriching. They get to share their expertise, and you get to learn from someone who truly knows their subject. The bridge-building aspect of this technique became crucial to my success in business relationships. When meeting with potential clients or partners, instead of launching into what I wanted to tell them about my services, I would first discover what challenges they were facing, what goals they were pursuing, or what aspects of their business excited them most. Then I would frame any discussion of my services in terms of how they related to those specific interests and concerns. Instead of giving a generic presentation about public speaking training, one might focus on how communication skills could help them achieve the specific business objectives they had mentioned, or address the particular leadership challenges they were facing. This approach transformed my relationships with family members too. Instead of trying to connect with my children by talking about what I thought was important for them to know, I learned to enter their world first to understand their current interests, their social dynamics, their hopes and concerns. Only then could I find natural ways to share wisdom or guidance in terms that resonated with their actual experience. The conversation starter cards I developed over the years weren't generic topics, but rather questions and approaches that helped me quickly identify what genuinely interested each person I met. Questions like, what project are you most excited about right now? Or what's been the most surprising thing about your work lately? Or if you could change one thing about your industry, what would it be? These questions worked because they invited people to share their expertise, their passion, or their perspective on something they cared about. They created immediate relevance and engagement because they were designed to uncover what already mattered to the other person. The compound effect of this approach has been extraordinary. Over the decades, I've learned about subjects I never would have explored on my own, gained insights into industries and experiences far from my own, and built connections with people from vastly different backgrounds because I learned to make every conversation a journey into what genuinely interests the other person. Remember, the goal isn't to become an expert in everyone else's interests, but to become genuinely curious about what makes other people passionate and engaged. When you can connect your message, your ideas, or simply your attention to what already matters to them, you create conversations that feel natural, valuable, and memorable for both of you. During my correspondence with Benjamin Franklin's biographers, I came across a letter where the great statesman outlined his approach to persuasion. Franklin wrote that the secret to influencing others was to always speak to their interests first, their concerns second, and your own objectives last. This wisdom helped me understand the psychological principle that governs all human attention. People only care about what directly affects them. This isn't selfishness, it's survival instinct. Our brains are constantly filtering information based on relevance to our own lives, goals, and well-being. When someone talks about topics that don't connect to our world, our attention naturally wanders. But when they speak to our interests, concerns, or aspirations, we become fully engaged. I learned to think of every conversation in terms of what I call emotional mathematics. Every person you meet is unconsciously asking themselves, what's in this for me? How does this relate to my life? Why should I care about what this person is saying? Until you answer these questions, you don't have their full attention or engagement. This principle revolutionized how I approached everything, from business presentations to family discussions. Instead of starting with what I wanted to communicate, I learned to start with what the other person needed to hear: information, perspectives, or insights that connected directly to their current situation and concerns. The WIIFM principle, what's in it for me, became my guide for making any topic personally relevant to my audience. This didn't mean being manipulative it meant taking the time to understand how my message, my ideas, or my insights could genuinely benefit the person I was talking with. I discovered that people experience 3 levels of relevance in conversation. The first level is informational. Relevance: the topic relates to something they need to know. The second level is emotional relevance. The topic connects to something they care about. The third level is transformational relevance. The topic has the potential to change their life or perspective in meaningful ways. Most conversations never get past informational relevance, which is why they feel superficial and forgettable. But when you can connect your message to someone's emotions or to their potential for growth and change, the conversation becomes memorable and impactful. The art of translation became essential to my communication success. I learned to take abstract concepts, general principles, or broad ideas and translate them into specific, personal terms that resonated with each individual's experience and concerns. For example, instead of talking generally about the importance of public speaking skills, I might focus specifically on how better communication could help a business owner connect more effectively with their customers. or how it could help a parent have more meaningful conversations with their teenage children, or how it could help a community leader build stronger support for important causes. This translation process required me to really understand each person's world, their challenges, their goals, their fears, and their aspirations. Only then could I find the natural connections between what I wanted to share and what they needed to hear. I learned that making something personally relevant often means shrinking the scale from general to specific. People connect more readily with individual stories than with statistics, with concrete examples than with abstract principles, with personal applications than with theoretical concepts. The timing of relevance matters too. Information becomes personally relevant when it addresses a current need, concern, or opportunity in someone's life. The same message that falls flat during one conversation might be incredibly compelling a few months later when circumstances have changed. This understanding helped me become more patient and strategic in my communications. Instead of trying to force relevance, I learned to listen for natural opportunities when my insights or experiences might genuinely help someone with what they were currently facing. The compound effect of mastering personal relevance transformed not just my professional success, but my ability to be helpful and valuable to others. When you consistently frame your conversations in terms of what matters to the other person, you become someone people seek out for advice, perspective, and support. After decades of studying, teaching, and practicing the art of conversation, I developed what became my personal conversation checklist, a systematic approach that integrated all 5 tricks into a natural, flowing method for connecting with anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances. This wasn't a rigid script to follow, but rather a framework that ensured I approached every interaction with the right mindset and tools. I kept this checklist in my mind for every important conversation, and it never failed to create meaningful connection and mutual value. The framework begins before you even speak. I call this the pre-conversation preparation. You set your internal state to one of genuine curiosity and warmth. You remind yourself that your goal is to understand and appreciate this person, not to impress them or get something from them. You take a moment to smile authentically and approach the interaction with positive energy. Step 1 is the interest opening. Instead of generic greetings or small talk, you begin with genuine curiosity about the other person. You might ask about a project they're working on, reference something you remember from a previous conversation, or inquire about something you've observed about their work or interests. The key is showing immediate interest in them as an individual. Step 2 is name integration. You use their name naturally and respectfully throughout the conversation, not excessively, but at key moments when you're asking questions or making important points. You pay attention to how they prefer to be addressed and honor their preference. You make mental notes about details they share so you can reference them in future interactions. Step 3 is deep listening engagement. You shift into empathetic listening mode, paying attention not just to their words, but to their emotions, values, and concerns. You ask follow-up questions that show you're truly processing what they're sharing. You resist the urge to jump in with your own stories or solutions until you've fully understood their perspective. Step 4 is interest bridge building. You look for natural connections between their interests and any insights, experiences, or resources you might share. You frame any contributions you make to the conversation in terms of their goals, concerns, or passions. You avoid forcing your own agenda and instead find organic ways to be helpful or valuable. Step 5 is authentic appreciation. You express genuine appreciation for their time, their insights, their expertise, or their perspective. This isn't empty flattery but sincere recognition of something valuable they've shared or demonstrated. You look for opportunities to make them feel important and valued as a person. The beauty of this system is its adaptability. Whether you're in a formal business meeting, a casual social gathering, or an intimate family conversation, these same principles create connection and trust. The specific words and topics may change, but the underlying approach remains consistent. I learned to read conversational cues and adapt in real time. When someone's energy increased, I knew I had touched on something that genuinely interested them, so I would explore that topic more deeply. When their attention seemed to wander, I would shift to asking questions that refocused on their experiences or concerns. Recovery techniques became crucial for those moments when conversations didn't go as planned. If I sensed I had said something that created distance or discomfort, I learned to acknowledge it directly. I get the sense that didn't come across the way I intended. Help me understand your perspective on this. When I forgot someone's name or missed an important detail they had shared, I learned to handle it with honesty and humility. I apologize. I'm drawing a blank on your name right now, but I clearly remember our conversation about your daughter's college applications. How did that work out? The natural flow from stranger to friend became almost predictable when I followed this system consistently. First conversations would establish mutual interest and respect. Second interactions would build on that foundation with remembered details and continued curiosity. Over time, these connections would deepen into genuine friendships and trusted relationships. The system worked because it addressed fundamental human needs: the need to be seen as an individual, the need to feel heard and understood, the need to have our interests and expertise valued, and the need to feel important and appreciated. When you consistently meet these needs in your interactions, people naturally gravitate toward you. I discovered that conversations following this method had a lasting impact that extended far beyond the immediate interaction. People would remember not just what we discussed, but how the conversation made them feel. They would often reference our talks weeks or months later, and they would seek me out for future conversations because they associated me with feeling valued and understood. The compound effect over decades has been extraordinary. This systematic approach to conversation has opened doors I never could have imagined, created friendships that have enriched my entire life, and allowed me to be genuinely helpful to thousands of people simply by making them feel important and appreciated. Remember, the goal isn't to manipulate or impress, but to create genuine human connection based on mutual respect and interest. When you approach every conversation with this intention and these tools, you transform from someone who talks to people into someone who connects with them at a meaningful level. The contract that changed my life came not because of my qualifications or credentials, but because of a conversation. I was competing for a major corporate training contract with dozens of other candidates, many with more impressive resumes and academic backgrounds. But during my interview, instead of focusing on selling my services, I spent most of our time learning about the company's specific challenges, their team dynamics, and their vision for growth. The decision maker later told me that while other candidates had impressed him with their expertise, I was the only one who had made him feel heard and understood. He said, "I knew you would actually listen to our people and address their real needs, not just deliver a generic program." That contract launched my career and taught me how conversation mastery translates into professional success in job interviews. Most candidates make the fatal mistake of trying to impress the interviewer with their accomplishments and qualifications. While credentials matter, what really determines hiring decisions is the human connection established during the interview process. Employers hire people they like, trust, and believe will fit well with their team culture. I learned to approach interviews by becoming genuinely interested in the company's challenges, goals, and culture. Instead of launching into my background, I would ask thoughtful questions. What are the biggest opportunities you see for this role? Or what qualities do your most successful team members share? This approach immediately differentiated me. from other candidates and provided valuable information I could use to frame my responses. Building executive presence became much easier once I understood that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making others feel heard, valued, and inspired. The executives I most admired weren't necessarily the smartest people in the room, but they were consistently the best listeners and the most skilled at making others feel important. I observed that effective leaders used conversation to create psychological safety within their teams. They asked questions that invited honest feedback. They listened without becoming defensive, and they acknowledged good ideas regardless of their source. This approach built loyalty and trust far more effectively than authoritative pronouncements or impressive displays of knowledge. The networking approach I developed focused on building genuine relationships rather than collecting business cards. At professional events, instead of trying to meet as many people as possible, I would focus on having meaningful conversations with a smaller number of individuals. I would learn about their current projects, their industry challenges, and their professional goals. The follow-up became crucial. I would send personalized messages referencing specific details from our conversations, often including relevant articles or resources that connected to their interests. This approach built a network of genuine, professional relationships rather than superficial contacts. Difficult conversations became much more manageable when I applied these conversation principles. Instead of approaching conflicts with the goal of winning or being right, I would focus first on understanding the other person's perspective and concerns. I would use their name respectfully, acknowledge their points of view, and look for common ground before addressing areas of disagreement. This approach transformed workplace conflicts from adversarial battles into collaborative problem-solving sessions. People were much more open to compromise and creative solutions when they felt heard and respected, even in disagreement. Leading through conversation rather than authority became my signature management style. Instead of giving direct orders or making unilateral decisions, I would engage my team in discussions about challenges and opportunities. I would ask for their input, listen to their concerns, and involve them in developing solutions. This conversational leadership style created higher levels of engagement, creativity, and ownership among team members. They felt valued for their expertise and perspectives, which motivated them to contribute their best thinking and effort to our shared goals. The key insight that transformed my professional relationships was understanding that business is ultimately about people connecting with people. Technical skills and industry knowledge are important, but they become powerful only when combined with the ability to build trust, communicate effectively, and make others feel valued and understood. Whether I was presenting to executives, training corporate teams, or negotiating contracts, the same conversation principles applied. Genuine interest in others, authentic appreciation for their perspectives, careful attention to their concerns and goals, and the ability to frame discussions in terms of their interests and values. The compound effect in professional settings has been remarkable. Over the decades, these conversation skills have opened doors, created opportunities, and built the relationships that became the foundation of my career success. More importantly, they've allowed me to be genuinely helpful to others in their professional journeys, which has been the most rewarding aspect of my work. The most treasured possessions in my desk drawer are the love letters my wife Dorothy wrote to me over the decades of our marriage. In one of them, she wrote something that touched my heart deeply. "You make me feel like the most interesting person in the world, even after all these years together." Her words reminded me that the conversation principles I taught in boardrooms and lecture halls were most important in the intimate relationships that gave life its deepest meaning. I learned early in our marriage that the same techniques that worked with business associates and students were even more crucial with family members. The difference was that with loved ones, the stakes were higher and the opportunities for both connection and hurt were magnified by daily proximity and emotional investment. The challenge with family relationships is that familiarity often breeds conversational laziness. We assume we know what our spouse is thinking, what our children are interested in, or what our parents are concerned about. We stop asking curious questions and start making assumptions. We stop listening deeply because we think we've heard it all before. I had to consciously apply the same disciplines with Dorothy that I used with new acquaintances. I would ask about her day not as a routine courtesy, but with genuine curiosity about her experiences, her thoughts, and her feelings. I would listen to her concerns about the household, her friendships, or her interests with the same attention I gave to business clients discussing their challenges. The transformation in our relationship was remarkable. Instead of the comfortable but superficial exchanges that characterize many long marriages, we maintained the kind of deep, engaging conversations that had brought us together in the first place. Dorothy often said that she felt like she was married to her best friend, someone who was genuinely interested in her inner world. With children, I discovered that conversation principles required even more patience and skill. Children are naturally self-centered, not out of selfishness, but because they're still developing their understanding of the world and their place in it. To connect with them conversationally, I had to enter their world completely, showing genuine interest in their games, their friendships, their school experiences, and their developing ideas about life. I learned to resist the parental urge to immediately offer advice or correction when my children shared their thoughts and experiences. Instead, I would first listen deeply to understand their perspective, ask questions that helped them think through situations themselves, and validate their feelings even when I disagreed with their conclusions. This approach created an environment where my children felt safe sharing their real thoughts and concerns with me. Instead of hiding their mistakes or struggles, they would come to me for guidance because they knew I would listen without immediate judgment and help them work through challenges themselves. The dinner table became our family laboratory for conversation skills. Instead of everyone sharing surface-level updates about their day, I would ask questions that invited deeper sharing. What was the most interesting thing that happened today? Or what's something you're curious about right now? Or who did something kind for you today? These questions transformed our family meals from routine check-ins into genuine exchanges of ideas, experiences, and perspectives. My children learned to listen to each other, to ask thoughtful questions, and to show interest in each other's lives. With extended family and longtime friends, I had to guard against the assumption that because we had history together, we didn't need to maintain the same conversational courtesies and attention that we would show to new relationships. I learned to approach family gatherings and old friendships with fresh curiosity, asking about current interests and concerns rather than relying on outdated assumptions about who these people were and what mattered to them. The most profound lesson I learned about family conversation was that love is not enough attention, and interest must be actively maintained and expressed. The people closest to us need to feel seen, heard, and valued just as much as strangers do. Perhaps more so because they've trusted us with their hearts and their daily lives. When I applied these conversation principles consistently within my family, the results were beautiful. Relationships deepened, conflicts decreased, and our home became a place where everyone felt genuinely valued and understood. The conversation skills that opened doors in the professional world opened hearts in the personal world, creating the kind of intimate connections that make life truly meaningful. In my files, I keep hundreds of letters from former students who wrote to share how mastering conversation skills had transformed their lives in ways they never expected. These letters taught me something profound. When you change how you connect with people, you change everything: your career trajectory, your relationships, your community influence, and even your sense of purpose in the world. One letter particularly moved me. It was from a shy engineer who had taken my course reluctantly, pushed by his supervisor who was concerned about his limited advancement potential. 6 months later, he wrote to tell me that he had not only received a promotion, but had been elected to lead his professional association. More importantly, he had reconnected with his teenage son after years of awkward, superficial exchanges. This pattern repeated itself thousands of times over the decades. People would learn these conversation skills for one specific purpose: to improve their sales results, to advance their careers, to be more effective leaders, to discover that the principles transformed every aspect of their lives. The compound effect of conversation mastery is unlike any other skill because relationships are the foundation of everything meaningful in human life. When you become skilled at creating genuine connections with others, opportunities begin to appear that you never could have planned or predicted. I watched students receive job offers from people they met at social gatherings, not because they were actively networking, but because they had made such positive impressions through genuine interest and authentic conversation. I saw marriages strengthen and deepen as spouses rediscovered the art of truly listening to each other. I observed parents rebuild relationships with estranged children, simply by learning to show genuine interest in their perspectives and experiences. The ripple effects extended far beyond individual relationships. As people became more skilled at conversation, they began to take on leadership roles in their communities, their churches, their professional organizations. They started businesses, led charitable efforts, and became the kind of people others naturally turned to for advice and guidance. This happened because conversation mastery creates what I call relationship wealth, a network of genuine connections based on mutual respect and shared value. Unlike networking based on what you can get from others, this relationship wealth is built on what you can give: attention, appreciation, understanding, and authentic interest in others' well-being. Over time, this relationship wealth compounds. People you've made feel valued and understood become allies and advocates. They think of you when opportunities arise. They trust you with important projects and responsibilities. They seek your advice and counsel because they know you'll listen with genuine care and respond with wisdom rather than judgment. I've observed that conversation masters develop a reputation that precedes them. People say things like, "You should meet Sarashi's, someone who really listens," or talk to Michael about that he has a gift for understanding people. This reputation becomes a professional and personal asset that opens doors and creates opportunities throughout their lives. The responsibility that comes with conversational power is significant. When people trust you with their thoughts, concerns, and dreams, you become a steward of their emotional well-being. The skills that allow you to make people feel valued and understood also give you the power to hurt or help them in profound ways. I learned to approach this responsibility seriously, always asking myself whether my interactions were truly serving the other person's best interests, or whether I was using my conversational skills to manipulate outcomes for my own benefit. The ethical dimension of conversation mastery became as important as the technical skills. The most remarkable ripple effect I've witnessed is how conversation masters become builders of community. They create environments where others feel safe to be authentic, to share their real thoughts and concerns, to collaborate rather than compete. Organizations led by people with these skills develop cultures of trust, creativity, and mutual support. These individuals often become bridges between different groups, different perspectives, and different communities because they're skilled at understanding and appreciating diverse viewpoints. They can help others find common ground and work together toward shared goals. The legacy of mastered conversation extends across generations. Children who grow up in homes where authentic conversation is modeled learn these skills naturally. They become adults who build strong relationships, lead with empathy, and contribute positively to their communities. The investment in conversation skills pays dividends not just in one lifetime, but across multiple generations. Looking back over my decades of teaching and practicing these principles, I'm continually amazed by the power of simple human connection. The 5 conversation tricks I've shared with you are not complex or difficult to understand, but their consistent application can literally transform your life and the lives of everyone you meet. In my final journal entry, written just weeks before my passing, I reflected on what I considered the most important discovery of my lifetime. Every conversation is a choice between connection and isolation, between building others up and tearing them down, between creating lasting value and wasting precious time. As I finish sharing these conversation principles with you, I want you to understand the choice you now face. You possess the knowledge that can transform every relationship in your life, open doors you never imagined, and allow you to make a profound positive impact on everyone you meet. But knowledge without application is worthless. It's what you do with these principles in your daily interactions that will determine their value. I challenge you personally to begin implementing these techniques immediately, starting with your very next conversation. Don't wait until you feel perfectly prepared or until you encounter the right situation. Every interaction, no matter how brief or seemingly insignificant, is an opportunity to practice these skills and to make someone feel valued and appreciated. Begin with genuine interest. In every conversation today, focus more on understanding the other person than on impressing them with your own knowledge or accomplishments. Ask questions that show you care about their experiences, their thoughts, and their concerns. Listen for what they're really saying beneath their words. Practice authentic appreciation. Look for something genuinely positive in every person you encounter: their dedication, their kindness, their expertise, their perseverance, or simply their willingness to share their time with you. Express this appreciation sincerely and specifically, not as empty flattery, but as recognition of their human value. Master the art of names and personal details. Starting today, commit to remembering and using people's names naturally in conversation. Pay attention to what matters to them, what they're working on, what they're proud of or concerned about. This information is the foundation of genuine human connection. Develop your listening skills systematically. Practice giving people your complete attention without thinking about what you want to say next or how their story relates to your own experiences. Create space for others to share their authentic thoughts and feelings without judgment or immediate advice. Learn to speak in terms of others' interests before sharing your own ideas or agenda. Understand what matters to the person you're talking with. Frame your thoughts and suggestions in terms of their goals, their concerns, and their values. I recommend starting with a practice schedule that makes these skills habitual rather than occasional. For the next 30 days, choose one principle to focus on each week. Week 1, genuine interest. Week 2, authentic, smiling, and positive energy. Week 3, names and personal details. Week 4, deep listening. Then begin the cycle again, adding the 5th principle of speaking to others' interests. Keep a simple journal of your progress. Note which conversations felt more connected and engaging, which techniques came naturally, and which ones require more practice. Pay attention to how people respond differently when you apply these principles consistently. Measure your progress not by how impressive you sound or how much you accomplish, but by how valued and understood you make others feel. The true test of conversation mastery is whether people seek you out for future interactions, whether they trust you with important concerns, and whether they light up when they see you approaching. Remember that these skills compound over time. Every person you make feel genuinely appreciated becomes part of a growing network of positive relationships. Every conversation where you listen deeply and speak to someone's interests builds your reputation as someone who truly cares about others. The impact extends far beyond your personal success. As you master these conversation principles, you become a force for good in the world. You create environments where others feel safe to be authentic, where creativity and collaboration flourish, where people support each other rather than compete destructively. Your conversation legacy begins with the next person you meet. Will you make them feel invisible and unimportant, or will you give them the gift of your genuine attention and appreciation? Will you focus on what you want to get from the interaction, or on what value you can provide? The choice is yours, and you make it fresh with every conversation. Choose connection over isolation. Choose curiosity over assumption. Choose appreciation over criticism. Choose listening over lecturing. Choose building others up over impressing them with your own accomplishments. These 5 conversation tricks have the power to transform your career, your relationships, and your entire life experience. But more importantly, they give you the ability to transform the lives of everyone you meet. One conversation at a time. The world needs more people who know how to create genuine human connection. It needs individuals who make others feel valued, understood, and appreciated. It needs conversation masters who can bridge differences, build trust, and bring out the best in those around them. That person can be you, starting today. Your conversation legacy awaits. Go out and begin building it, one meaningful interaction at a time.